That's innovation.
Yeah, guys, just to inform that this session will be recorded and it will be put on social media, YouTube and everywhere. So please be aware that you might see yourself in social media and trending. Cool. Yeah, so now we have a small exercise again. Jessica. Sorry, it's not working. Cool. Story time. So we are going to present a story in which the ending is not there. So the words which you have thought right now, you need to group together in a group of, let's say, 5 to 10 participants. Think over it. What could be the possible ending of that story, right? And the Zoom participants will be divided into the breakout rooms. You guys can discuss. You have 5 minutes, and this is the story. And we'll be back after 5 minutes. Thank you.
We won't be able to see the breakout rooms, so we might want to get them to everyone in the group.
Sure.
The Google intern.
Okay.
The actor, not Ben Stiller. Yes.
Guys, if you are logged in with Zoom, please log off from there. We need to set out the participants who are only online into the breakout rooms. So please log off from the Zoom. Thank you.
Come with the story ending.
Then you can discuss.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Anybody would like to share? Did any group find out the proper ending? Anyone?
I think the group behind there was very
Yeah,
lively.
you guys can go ahead.
Yes.
Go for it. We are not looking for any perfect ending.
It was a group discussion firstly.
Mhm.
So we thought that Ben should confront Julia and tell her to repay the money and to stop doing what she's doing. Because if she wants to be in the top 100 CEOs, she's not going to get there doing that. And yeah, he definitely needs to confront her. And then maybe keep his distance from women like that.
And did you find it challenging to correlate with the topic of innovation and inclusion? Did you?
No, I'm not connecting the story to the event.
Okay,
Like, in my mind.
fair enough. Anyone from this side? Ray, did you think of it something?
Same, I guess.
Okay. Anyone from Zoom? Hendrik, right?
Yeah, we may be looking to inclusion somehow is that he also could, like, we agree with what the other group said, but we also saw the potential that he could give her somehow a bit of his knowledge, given that he's older and have more experience of life. He could like somehow also gave her a bit more long-term perspective and in comparison to short-term gains.
Okay, cool. There's another hand, sir.
I think, if you read the business case, she committed a crime. So I think the reasonable thing to do is to come clean with it and report it, because you have a fiduciary duty to your shareholders. So that would be my reaction.
So thank you guys for being a part of this small activity. Now I hand over to Anuj, who will carry out the further discussion.
Thank you, Jasmine. So before we sort of go forward, I would really like to take this time out to appreciate our panelists for today's event. Big round of applause for them to participate on the stage right now. And I would like to give everyone a little background, because innovation through inclusion is not just a topic which sort of both our student clubs share. It's something which a lot of organizations in today's day and age also believe necessary to succeed in today's corporate world. And we have found that this these common set of values is something which unites not just us at the Entrepreneurship Roundtable, at the Women in Business team, but also in WHU. Also the fact that we have found sponsors resonates the fact that this belief is shared in the market. So we would like to share some tangible insights for everyone, sort of take back something and really apply by the end of the day to your own homes, to your own lives. So I would like to start our discussion by asking all our panelists one very simple question. They have been students themselves. In fact, Lina and Jackie have been affiliated with WHU in the past. So from your own personal experiences in diversity and inclusion, could you share some stories on what kickstarted you in this journey?
I'll start.
Absolutely.
So for me personally, my background is I'm half American, half German, and I actually grew up going to an international school. So I really had the privilege and the benefit to really be immersed in different cultures, different nationalities, that type of thing from a really young age. And that was something that I really appreciated coming here, because that was sort of a spirit that I had missed being at college in the States and also here in Germany, where you do kind of, you're with your peers, I mean, especially in the States, you don't have necessarily a lot of international people, and they tend to also not be necessarily included, like they kind of stick to themselves. And so I felt that the WHU was a good choice for me at that time, because it sort of represented the the lifestyle that I'd already previously led, and was, yeah, happy to see that that was also the case.
Oh, this is really interesting. So you literally found yourself between two cultures.
Yeah, yeah.
In a sense, and
We actually call international students third culture kids, because you're really, you grow up with so many different diverse backgrounds that you can't really say that you're only American or you're only German. Kind of pick up on a lot of different aspects. It's really cool.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, so for me, same, I'm half German, half Brazilian, so I found myself in the same struggle, like, where do I belong? And do I have to become more German to fit in, so to say? And when I joined WHU, I actually saw that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're half German, half Brazilian, or if you have three cultures in yourself. Who counts is the personality and the identity you grow into. And in particular, in my case, I'm almost blind since I'm 9 years old. And for my entire life, up to the point that I joined WHU, people always treated me differently. And I thought that I need to kind of be very thankful if people give me a job or if they believe in me or something like that. And when I joined WHU, I remember very good that on the first day, we were 44 students from 18 different nationalities. I was part of the full-time program, so the opportunity costs were pretty high. And I thought and said to myself, they will throw me under the bus in the first opportunity they see, because nobody wants to work with a handicapped person, because that was my experience up to the point. And the program taught me that if you really work in a diverse team, it doesn't matter what your background is and what you bring into, because you always bring assets due to the challenges you went through. And this is actually what was a life-changing opportunity, and what I learned here during the program, due to the fact, I believe, because here are so many different nationalities, backgrounds, stories, sad stories, happy stories, challenges, and you go through a lot of pain during the program together. Yeah, so that was my experience here. It doesn't matter if I can see or if I can't see. It was amazing.
Absolutely. It's such a touching story and background you have had. Timo, do you have any experiences that you would like to share with us?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me today, and I'm very pleased, and big apologies that I have to attend due to illness today online. Yeah, actually my first experience with inclusion I had was in elementary school because of my different nationalities, because I'm half German on the one side and half Turkish on the other. And therefore the topic was already very close in the childhood. Yeah, and from this point of view, you look on the topic a little bit different, maybe. And later on the business side, I had to gather very quickly the experience that, especially in, for example, application processes, a lot of colleagues from me had problems because there is difference are made here, and I saw it also on different startups. And I have some examples for you, which is really bad. So I have things like, I don't want to work with, for example, Indians, because when I work with them on software projects, they are very slow. Or I don't want to work with the Turk in marketing team, because they certainly doesn't speak the German language very well. And I think that especially these. You say something?
No.
Okay. And I think that especially these generations are really dangerous. Yeah, and this is some of my experience on inclusion.
That's really touching as well. I mean, it's quite a, like, I also did not know this, that before we call all the speakers, everyone's half German, half nationality. So that's a really exciting mix-up we have here today. Lina, you mentioned how one's strengths can become an asset to the team. So could you touch upon what does it really mean to be truly inclusive in today's modern world? Because that's like a buzzword which a lot of people use right now. What does it truly mean?
Well, first of all, I think we need to distinguish because in German we talk about Inklusion with K, right? And that's unfortunately just linked to including people with a handicap. And thanks God we use inclusion with C when we talk about D&I, because I do think everybody needs to be included and everybody felt excluded once in their life. Latest when they were a teenager and the one person they fell in love for the first time normally don't want to include them in their life. So what I normally do is bring this example to people to set the stage for inclusion. It's like you want to be part of something, you want to belong, and you do not fit in. Why I think this is very important for teams is most of the time you get perspectives that you couldn't think about. And it's about asking. So I give you a quick example, which just happened here. You shared the story, right? And for me, it was impossible to be part of until the moment that Jackie said, do you want me to sum it up for you? So because she knew that I can't read it and I expressed what help I need, she could offer me this help. But first of all, and this is what's important in team, you need to have the safety ground where people can share what's their, or why they're different. So to say, it not necessarily has to be a handicap. It can be also that people have challenges with languages or social anxiety, or they're afraid to pick up the phone, or they have belief systems that are different. If you do not express what you need and what you think is your liability, you can't turn it into an asset. So we need to have an open discussion in teams. Because as I mentioned, when I joined the WHU program, I thought that my visual impairness is the biggest liability I can bring to high performing teams. And I learned through sharing this fear and being feedback by the others that it's actually not a liability, but it is an asset because I bring another perspective, because I think different. But in my little universe, I wouldn't know that. So if we do not have this psychology safety room in the team, you can't switch it, you can't include. So it's a responsibility from everybody in the team to openly share what they think they can add or can't add to the team. And based on that, you develop the team strengths. But first you need to go where people probably feel uncomfortable. You need to go to the uncomfortable to then become really strong as a team and turn things that you think that are your liabilities and weaknesses into strengths.
I absolutely agree. I think social safety is one of these things which it's a standard that we keep excelling towards, that keep redefining, and I think it has different meanings for different people. So it's very important to be as inclusive as possible to consider all of these personal boundaries and definitions. But an interesting dichotomy, I think, for all the panelists today is that on one hand, we're in a stage of human development, which is so integrated, so interconnected, and we're so globalized, and we're so socially, economically dependent and inclusive on other countries. Why is there a disparity when it comes to social inclusivity?
Well, so I do think that it is because we think a lot about what we should do, and we assume how social inclusion works, and we do not try it, right? So social inclusion, or any inclusion at all, you just can experience while you're trying that. You need to encounter people that are different. If you do not encounter them, it's just on paper. It's like designing a startup just on your computer. And I do think that Jackie knows that it
Totally.
doesn't work.
And I think as well, there's a real difference between interacting with someone online, potentially watching one of our stories, or being, it's definitely good that you have exposure to those people in that visual way, but there's a whole different relationship when you're actually confronted with a person or a situation, and you actually have to speak to them and not just watch them. And I think in terms of companies, if you're comparing like seeing other people online on whatever TikTok, Instagram, the whole thing versus actually working together with them. It's like any other situation. If you're not speaking with humans, then you're going to be clammed up. You're going to be anxious about it. And you need to kind of, I think there needs to just be more actual interaction with diverse, inclusive people. And that works in a working environment or in a student environment, that type of thing.
Absolutely. And Timo, what are your thoughts on this?
I believe if you look on social inclusion, for example, you have a big gap in access to job opportunities, which is really big. For example, I support Joblinge, and Joblinge is like an institution that supports people with difficult starting conditions and give them exemplary support in finding jobs. And I just had today a call with a mentee from me, and they told me, look, I'm right now 22 years old, and I don't have a job, and I don't have I don't finish my school, and now I'm looking to find a job. Can you help me with this? And he had really bad conditions in the past with his family because he was adopted. He came from China, and he was beaten up by by his family, which adopted him. And after this, he went and looking for help, and nobody was there who could help him. And if we're looking on this part of, for example, social inclusion, I believe, there is a big gap, as well as you look on the startup side. For example, if you have the opportunity to go to a very good university and building your network very big as well. For example, WHU is well known for the past rocket internet companies, and so there you have a very big and well good connected ecosystem. And when you have a start like this, you have better conditions than people like him. For example, he will have an harder way to get to there than people which having better starting conditions, for example. And this is how I trying to help these people at Joblinge, for example.
That's interesting. I mean, you touched upon another interesting aspect on how inclusion can also mean driving success for those stakeholders through creating an innovative environment for them. However, innovation and inclusion are two very separate concepts. So one thing I would like to ask all the panelists is, how do you see the overlaps and boundaries of each thing? Because, for example, inclusion can be many things, but inclusion with innovation is a very specific environment, is a very specific skill set, a very specific ecosystem.
Yeah. I mean, I think the key point, and this is, something we touched on earlier, is that it's all a matter of perspective. So if you're getting different perspectives from different people, from different backgrounds, different challenges, whatever, you might look at a task or a problem or a solution in a completely different way. And that can absolutely drive innovation because, for example, if you don't have the daily hindrance of not being able to see, like you would never come up with a solution potentially to do it differently, right? Whereas she would have just an entirely different perspective and could, just theoretically, like bring in new ideas, new things, which then could snowball into this and that and that. And that's all about kind of setting the stage of, new perspectives, new experiences, and also exposing people to different viewpoints.
Yeah.
Yes, and so what comes in mind so the first thing that came to my mind when you asked this question was actually why it is either or. In my perspective, inclusion just works with innovation, and innovation just works with inclusion. because you just can be innovative if you distinguish a new need. If there's something that's not solved. So something that's not solved is a problem. And if there's a problem that normally leads to somebody, it's not possible to make part of something, right? So that's why I said like inclusion, we see it's actually, if you think about, let's take Siri from like, or Alexa or whatsoever, this entire, the assistants that speak, they were based on the need of people that are blind and visual impaired. That's why Mac, so Apple already integrated it in the 90s. That's why the iPhone 4S had Siri, like it was a speaking assistant first. And let's be honest, who's not working with Siri on the iPhone? And I do think that nowadays it's more people that can see than that can't see. But if you look into all the accessibility features from the Apple products, for example, normally they come from the need of somebody who needs to be included, right? Who has a difficulty, who has a problem, and then spreads to the others. That's why I do think this concept, it's not either or, they're interlinked. And if you have innovation, then you will include a customer group, you will include somebody that is in need, you will include somebody who comes from social difficult conditions to a better one, right? Inclusion, it's actually, if we look more to inclusion to the different perspectives, then we can be faster in innovation and by the end be more sustainable businesses. It's not about being a good person, right? It's like most of the people talk about inclusion because companies needs to be sustainable and social responsible. Yeah, that's all important. But actually talking about inclusion, it's talking about a business model and that there are opportunities that people do not look to because they do not ask, they assume that there's a problem. They do not ask if there's a problem. And that's why it's, for me, the concepts are hand in hand.
That's really insightful. But if I may ask Timo, because he's worked exclusively with startups, in the case of startups, I think there's a lot about maximizing the target group which is already there. And in a lot of cases, they haven't really reached that potential. So do you think that innovative startups can be inclusive? And vice versa, large-scale enterprises which build their business on economies of scale can be inclusive as well. But I do understand there are exceptions such as Apple in this case or Amazon with Alexa, but can this be the norm?
Sure, yeah, I'm unmute, yeah. Yeah, thanks for the question. Just to get a step back, at first, if you look at the studies for startups, for example, the German Startup Monitor, DSM, Deutsche Startup Monitor, they tell you the most neck breakers for startups is at first the founding team, then second it's always sales, and third is financing. And on the third part, we support with Startup Finanzen, which is Finanzien. And here we support growth-oriented companies as well, investors with growth financing and, for example, company evaluation and some other topics. And if we just step back to the other question, and then I come back. So if we talk, for example, on the social inclusion into startups, when I was the head of finance and controlling at a company in Cologne with up to 50 employees, we regularly worked with various institutions within the framework of inclusion to give, for example, refugees a chance to offer them internships. Because in fact, we once managed to place one of these people in an apprenticeship, which was a huge success. The problem is because that a refugee, for example, comes to a new country, doesn't speak the language, and yeah, is uncertain. And also that in most cases, the qualifications from these refugees are not taken into account in Germany. We do have a lot of refugees, for example, which have a PhD, but they do really bad work in Germany. And so thus the people will have to start again from scratch, which is really bad. And yeah, and in preparation for today's roundtable, because I'm not an expert in inclusion, actually, I'm an expert in corporate finance, as you know, but I say, okay, because we support a lot of startups which have impact and is in terms of impact investing, which means socially, ecological, or economic, they have an impact. And I had a very exciting and friendly conversation with Rovina, and Rovina is an MBA holder from the WHU, and I talked with her a little bit to give you some more insights, for example, of a WHUler and also women. And she told me, because she is in the same industry as me, she worked as a venture capitalist at Capnemic, and Capnemic is here in Cologne, a very big venture capitalist. And she is also a member of the Global Women in VC, which is also a big problem in our ecosystem, because she told me, for example, that for you as first Indian and a woman, finding a job in finance is particularly difficult because the field is dominated by white men. And it is like this, that the private equity and venture capital market is dominated by white men. But it's not just the private equity and venture capital market, it's also, there is a lot of startups where you just have a founding team of men. And she told me, okay, how I can accelerate myself to find a job in these sector, VC or private equity. And she told me at the time she had especially chosen the MBA of WHU so that she could score points with branding. So which means I believe you have done a good decision here right now. I just want to give you some insights from an other WHU because I'm not one. And no, by chance, I was also at a business angel event in Cologne, which called the Business Angel Tag 2021. This is the biggest business angel event once a year. And again, the trend was there is many white and male driven people. And talking about innovation in everyday language is the sense of bringing new ideas or inventions for commercial implementation. But on the startup case, you always think about disrupting something. So building something new, which brings value, for example, on economic, social, or ecological impact, and change the world a little bit. And I believe the limit of growth can only be human-made because we are only as big as our imagination. So which means talking about inclusion into startups, I'm strongly convinced that inclusive behavior can actively bring these startups forward. Because since we work with a lot of different companies on daily basis, we realize how valuable a diverse team is, which so not only from the point of view of having women, people of color, or people with a different sexual orientation or something other in the team, but also from the point of view, for example, socially weaker groups, so the social inclusion. Because we have made the experience that when people with different level of education work together, the perspective can be greatly changed. Often different problems can be solved in the company as a result. We saw this a lot because we started just with the IHK and with the IHK you can do an apprenticeship, for example, with people, and we are also a company which do this and helping people with their training and education. And so we have a lot of different levels of education which working together. For example, we do have people with a PhD, but we also have people with, I don't know the English word for it, it's Hauptschule. We do have people which have a Hauptschulabschluss, and they will do the training by us and will gain then their Realschulabschluss, and after that maybe they will study. And so you have a more, this leads to a better corporate culture, and the team becomes more international, more colorful, and often because of the differentiation during the people, new innovative ideas can emerge as a result. This is what we learned during this 2-year journey.
Interesting, very, very interesting the way you integrate different people from different backgrounds. Jackie, you have a very, very unique business model. So could you tell us, how do you pull insights? I mean, of course, being a mother yourself, it makes a lot of difference, but it's a very niche market. So how do you cater to this model? How do you ensure that when you're being inclusive, you still drive efficiency?
Right. So in our startup, we're really like at the very beginning. I mean, we've launched, but we're still kind of a 3-man show currently. But it's interesting because, I mean, the great thing about motherhood is that, you know, it really doesn't matter if where you're from or, you know, your background. Like birth is birth, and it's pretty much a unique, or actually not, well, unique obviously experience, but it's very similar regardless of your background or your situation. And so we kind of have a product that filled a need for most women, I think, in that situation. One of the things that we are noticing though is that we are looking at it from our own personal perspective in terms of consumer products. Like, what would we like to buy? What would we like to, you know, purchase? What are the things that we needed? And we're finding that we actually do need to step back and take a look at potentially, you know, other customer segments, other socioeconomic groups. Like, is that something that we are catering to their needs? Are they understanding what we're selling? So in that perspective, it's definitely somewhere where we need to, in the long run, obviously get to. From a strictly male-female perspective, you know, we're very visual, we're very kind of marketing oriented. We kind of need sometimes a guy to just be like, no, like, these are the things you need to do for the sales, these are the analytics, these are the business numbers behind it. So just having that perspective would be helpful down the line, you know, to have someone to kind of rein us back from our creativity and say, but hold on, this is still a business, you know, and this needs to be kind of taken from this perspective. So yeah, I'm excited for our team to grow. I mean, we just had our 2nd round of financing, and so we're starting to grow our team, and it'll be interesting to see the team members that join for a specifically female topic.
Absolutely. I think it'll shape the way you do business as well. So
totally, yeah, for sure.
Great. And this question, I would say, is more or less open for the entire panel. Given the discussion that we've had today about creating people, bringing people together from different backgrounds, ensuring that there's a safety net, there's a certain comfort they feel, sharing their ideas, so that they become more inclusive, more innovative as a process. How can one practically implement this? How can one create the safety net for people?
Well, it's pretty easy. It's just be really curious about the other perspective. I do know that especially the last years where diversity and inclusion becomes such a big topic, and people try to include it in their marketing campaign. But if we really talk about what does it mean and what can you do in your team, is be curious and treat each and every person like a human. You wouldn't, if somebody opens up and says I know that I'm the person that's responsible for sales, for example, but I do have a stutter, or I'm afraid of talking to male or something like that. So be open, listen, as a leader in particular, be open and listen to it. And I do think that inclusion starts with a really good feedback culture. And big giving and receiving feedback, this is like giving a gift and also accepting that somebody says, well, that makes sense in your reality and not in mine. But being open and being curious and sharing realities, that's what everybody can do, because you do not need to have an MBA degree for something, or university at all. This is actually when we are kids. We are extremely curious. We want to understand, and we do not think that it's kind of weird if somebody is sitting in a wheelchair, right? Kids run there and ask like, why are you not running? They're not judging, right? So that's what I tell actually the leaders I work with. I tell them, look at your kids, look at your nephews, or just look at cartoon and remember how amazing it is to be curious like a kid and integrate that in your corporate culture. And then automatically you become more inclusive.
And I think kind of piggybacking on that, you know, any type of business relationship is still a relationship, right? And when you're in a relationship, you open up to one another. And it's kind of leading by example. So if you as a leader show kind of a vulnerability or also an openness, you might encourage others to do the same and potentially, you know, say from your own perspective, oh, well, you know, this is a story of my past, or I had an issue public speaking or whatever, you know, might be the issue. If you kind of immerse yourself in your team and also be vulnerable with them, they might feel more inclined to be vulnerable with you.
Agree. Totally. Timo, and what about you?
I have nothing to add here, I think.
Great. If I may ask, how do you guys think the role of the government should be in all of this? In terms of just corporate governance, how can one ethically maintain a balance between inclusivity and favoritism in that sense, you know? Because we can create, because we had this discussion in the past events as well, wherein there were discussion about quotas. When you start quotas, it can lead to a very, very long and dark place. So what are your thoughts on this in terms of governance, and how can we ethically maintain something of this nature?
You said government in the
Like
beginning.
government and the role of
Yeah.
corporate governance as a result.
I think in terms of government, there are a lot of programs that are aiming to do that. And I think that needs to be definitely continuously supported. I know that, for example, in the States, in terms of colleges, back in the 60s, they had something called affirmative action, which is where they ensured that a certain percentage of people of color were admitted to universities. And the goal of that was exactly to what we were saying, is to allow people to have exposure to other races in that case, so that it's not like an alien situation. You know, like if you're from a small town wherever and you've never seen, you know, someone of color, then you might not know how to deal with it. But if you're confronted with them in a university setting, that was the goal, is to kind of make it a normal thing. And so I think that type of thought process is generally beneficial, right? To sort of force people to come together and be exposed to one another. I'm not sure exactly like how the government can force companies to do that. And in terms of governance, like that should definitely also be a goal, is to just make sure that you have leadership positions available, you know, for women, for people of color, for people with disabilities. But in a way that not everybody feels like, oh, you're just filling a quota, you know, like to actually make it something of event, you know, really communicate the benefits of that as well, you know.
Well, so I think, talking from a government perspective, it is really to think about equalizing chances. So it doesn't help if the government gives has a strong social net like we have in Germany. But actually, I do know it's pretty easy to find a lot of excuses to not include yourself in the first work market if you have a disability. So we're not talking about equalizing chances. We are more like, so to say, in my words, make the life easier, assuming you know what the person needs, and to have like to have more chances, like it can be a quota in schools or in universities, or make communicating that, for example, if you as a company in Germany, if you employ somebody who has a disability, you do not have to pay 1 cent out of your pocket to build a ramp or to do anything that's related to the workplace. But the last time I checked this number, there were more than 80% of companies not knowing that. So when they were thinking about employing somebody with a handicap, They were thinking from a total understandable business perspective about the investment they have to do, they have to make to include a person. And also, for example, same right to dismiss somebody in the approbation time. There's not a difference if the person has a handicap or not. Most of the people don't know that. So I do think that there's more transparency needed from the government side. This is not happening at all, at least in Germany. And stopping to try to think they know how they solve the problem of the group that needs to be integrated, but rather asking them what they really need and then provide them that they have equal chances. It could be a scholarship to go to WHU because I come from a social challenging background, or to any other university. In governance, talking about corporates, what I do think is really like encouraging everyone to have a speak up culture, right? We can just change the favoritism or not inclusive culture if people speak up, if we have allyship, if we really discuss the topic of privileges, because there are some privileges that we inherit that, like, you do not choose if you are being born as a male or a female. You do not choose if you are tall or not tall, right? And people are judged by that. But there is like privileges you inherited, and there are privileges that you get with your function and you create them through your education, and then how people work with that. And we need to have discussions about that. And then speak up if there are people being discriminated, like allyship. These are the things, like really working on a culture of belonging. And that needs to be part in a governance, in a corporate governance. I do think as an attitude, as a corporate behavior.
Equalization of chances. And that's something which I think Timo also touched upon, how a starting position, a better starting position makes so much of a difference in creating opportunities for others. Timo, you also mentioned one very interesting thing, that VCs in general are dominated by men and dominated for certain ethnicity. One statistic that I was reading about was that around only 14% of overall funding within Central and Eastern Europe goes to mixed team startups, which basically means that the startup founding team has women and men. 86% of the funding in Germany goes to all male dominated starting founding teams. So why do you think this is the case, and how could we sort of address this issue?
Yeah, it's a difficult topic because the studies is right actually, but we need to find more things which is into this into this problem, because I just had a very long chat with a women business angel. By the way, they want you that you call the women business angel right now Angelinas, which is very interesting. But and these Angelinas told me, okay, look, Timo, I don't have a focus on women businesses. It's not because I don't want to invest in women. It's because first, it's like there is more founding teams which is male driven. This is a problem, and here we can do, for example, helping more women to find themselves as an entrepreneur, because they think always, okay, the entrepreneur, which is always in our grammatic, which is the Geschäftsführung. It's like you think about it's male. It's a male thing to found a company. This could be a big problem, I think. Then you can help women founders a lot with, for example, workshops. You can tell them how to found a company, and so on and so on. So this is one big problem. You have more male-driven founding teams. Then the next topic, which is also a big problem, you have. It's not a problem. I mean, it's more a kind of thing of interest. The most business models which is founded by women is not like AI or tech or construction or things like this. It's more like it's a lot of in the beauty, sports, fitness, and it's another interest. So, and we work with a lot of investors which is looking for potential targets, and they tell us, okay, Timo, I'm trying to identify my in the screening process, and I'm looking for a company with ABC or something like this, which is in the GICS, the Global Industry Classification Standard. And here you can see different industries. And yeah, this is also a big problem, that you have more women in these industries. It's not always like that, but this is a problem. And what I think, which is really great, that you have right now more women VCs, which is actively seeking for opportunities to invest in women founders. And I think this can help as well, but I don't think that this will be enough. I think you need to motivate women to found companies and to be to do it, because in my experience, mostly the women founders is way more straight than the male founders, and mostly they are more, how to say, concentrate on their business, because they don't they don't take care about status and something like this. And you have male founders, they take this into account, and a lot of women is more, I would say women are more, sometimes the better founding partner of a startup than a male. And so it would be really great if there is more women which try to found a company. Of course, there is a risk, but by the end of the day, it will be a very exciting journey. And so I think this is a lot of this is a problem of VCs in investing in companies, in startups. It's not just they don't like women, it's because of a lot of these things.
Fair enough. It's also the structure of the organization. It's about the fact there's not enough demand on the other side to start businesses, and also the interests are very niche. So I think it's a long drawn process, but it's interesting to know your thoughts. Just to, unfortunately, as much as I would love to have this conversation for another half an hour, we are at the end of our scheduled agenda. I would just like to ask you guys, as a final closing thought, first, all of us want to take something back from this MBA. The first time we go to the job market after this. So how best can we sort of live these values as you guys clearly embody all of these values of innovation through inclusion? I would just like to know your closing thoughts on the subject.
Well, so first of all, when you step out of the program and go back to reality, you will have a clash of cultures. So the most important thing is be aware of that, and don't step into the know it better blind spot, which happens a lot for leaders when they come out of such a program where you are exposed to diversity, to fast thinking people, challenging and everything, and then you go back to reality and then you say, do I belong here? So be aware of that, first of all, and just be curious and see how maybe you, especially in the first months after the program, you distinguish the one problem that nobody thought about, but you are bringing the solution from your experience during the program. That's actually your USP and how you can accelerate your integration.
Thank you. That's really interesting.
I would say from a little bit of a different perspective in terms of being entrepreneurial. When I first started here, like I didn't think that I was going to really be an entrepreneur. I thought, oh, an MBA, ooh, sounds good. Like, I'm going to get married anyway. And then that was really kind of my mindset. And then I was really inspired, and now I have 2 businesses. So it's crazy how things can change. But I think what Timo said before is really a good point, is that there's not enough women founders in general to be able to get those VC deals, and also specifically in those kind of big booming branches. And so I think it's also kind of taking the confidence that we get at the MBA and potentially integrating and including yourself, by saying, well, I actually am good enough to apply for this job, to become an entrepreneur, to be part of that think tank, whatever you think you were going to do, you have to, especially as a woman, I think we tend to underestimate our own ability and potentially take a back seat, or I'm not good enough, or why should they invite me to this interview? And, the WHU MBA really kind of empowered me and has the potential to empower specifically also women to either go their own way or actively seek inclusion in big roles. And so that's one major thing that I would say.
Thank you. And Timo, from you?
Actually, I don't have the WHU MBA, so but
That's why you're not here tonight.
yeah, but as mentioned before, this was because I had to chat with Rowena, and she is an MBA holder from the WHU, and she told me she used it as kind of a branding thing to get a job into the venture capital world in Germany, and it worked actually. So, and I also believe there is a big value behind the brand WHU. You saw it in the past. I mean, there is a lot of very big startups and well succeeded startups from the WHU, and WHU is well known as the Unternehmerschmiede. It's like a company builder for success startups. And yeah, I believe you with the WHU MBA, you made a good decision, I would say. And in terms of inclusion, I just saw the participants was very diverse, and I just get during this conversation some LinkedIn invites, and it was also very diverse, and I like it. So I mean, it's kind of cool, yeah.
Great, awesome. So big round of applause for our panelists and our speakers. And now we're officially open for questions. So,
what's your piece of advice for dealing with people that may not be as on board with inclusion as you are? So as like a woman that worked in investments the past 5 years, often you're in the only like person under 50 and female in the room. So there's only so much you can do like by speaking up all the time. I was wondering if you have any further pieces of advice.
Yeah, that's a tough question. To be honest, in my past corporate life, before I was a founder, I was really lucky that my company really also put very young people in senior positions, and always had kind of that, I guess, age diversity. I would say maybe if it's a specific person, actually say that it's bothering you and that you're noticing an issue, and that, speak to them first before, flying the HR flag or whatever. But saying like, am I interpreting this wrong? Or is this like, this is the way it's coming across to me? How can I, sort of that approach, what can I do to change it? It's a little bit reverse psychology, but that's something that would come to mind. I don't know, that's kind of why I decided to do my own thing.
Well, just adding up on what Jackie said, from my experience, like from my coaching background, it's actually exactly that, share your reality. So first of all, I do think don't speak up for the sake of speaking up. Like if you if you are the different one, if you're the pink elephant in the room, make that your advantage. If you're the only one under 50, amazing. You know a lot of things they don't know. So you can offer reverse mentoring, for example, in a very nice way, right? But it's most of the times we underestimate that all the discussions that we have, they most of the times come from a place of fear.
Yeah, insecurity.
Insecurity. And the best thing is a good laughter. It's like offering, it's like selling yourself, not speaking up of like, oh, is everybody seeing the pink elephant? It's like hugging the pink elephant, say like, well, hey, look at me, I'm the pink elephant. Let me tell you how it is. Humor is the best thing that helps in inclusion, because that's how you break the fear. That's actually my experience. It's sometimes it's hard, right? And sometimes it's tough. And it's not about laughing about yourself, right? But it's just taking the awkward situation with a humoristic way of thinking. And yeah, like if you are the only one under 50, you have the competitive advantage for the 21st century. So bargain on that.
And if I may, I can add something here, because I work, for example, for very big companies like Ford, or a private subsidiary from the Bundeswehr, which called BWBM, and there was a lot of old and I would say old people, and you had the problem that you want to stand up and give some topics a voice. I could give you also an example, which is really crazy, but I will leave it here. And they don't want to change anything because it worked since several years. They have their own processes, and then you find yourself in this situation. I would always say, then if it doesn't work, you don't belong there. And they if they want to change, then throw them under the bus and go to another journey, because just working for a brand doesn't worth it at all.
Thank you so much for a very interesting discussion. I think I picked up a lot of insights. So my name is Patience. I'm curious about a part that I think all three of you mentioned around putting inclusion into part of the business model, right? And I hear the same sort of say when we talk about sustainability and ESG and these sort of topics. So I'm curious from your perspective, where do you draw the line between just doing a nice thing, a good thing for charity, and actually having companies and businesses include that as really part of their business model, which means is some sort of profitability to be realized from actually embracing inclusion. Do you know what I mean?
Totally. I think there's a key distinction between doing something because of charity or doing something that is ultimately beneficial to your company. And just doing something, you could just send money somewhere and be able to market that and say, all right, we're now we're for every tree we cut down, or all of those slogans. It's a matter of your intention, I think, right? Like, what is your actual intention behind that? Are you just doing it to brand yourself as being generous, or is it actually something that you want to implement in your company? And there's a lot of talk about sort of that fakeness about it. But on the other hand, I guess what I'm trying to say is whatever you are deciding to do, it's good because you're exposing it to the world. You're putting a spotlight on whatever thing you're doing. But I think what Lina said before is that the point is it's not just a charitable action. It's something that could actually benefit your business financially, right? If you put in the work now, for example, in terms of environmentally sustainable, down the line, when wood prices are through the roof like they are now, paper you can't get, like all of these things, if those companies would have invested a few years ago in, paperless whatever, let's just talk about the German Behörde, that would have been a very smart financial decision. And so I think also in terms of inclusivity and innovation, those are decisions you're making now for a future time. And also obviously socially beneficial.
Yeah, well, and adding to what Jack just said, I do think what's the most important thing, and I do see that a lot in companies, is they try to do both on the same time. They want to do something that has more a charity touch, but they want to be profitable with it. It doesn't work. Either you decide that you do something because you do it for charity purpose and you do it for free and you do not expect money in, or you do something that's related to sustainability, inclusion, everything with the sake of profitability, of business model, of growing a market, of whatever. That's, if you try to have it both ways, then it never adds, because you will be judged from the one side that you're kind of doing something charity, but you want to make money with that, and you will be judged from the other side that you're not focusing enough on profitability because you want to be charity. So as a company, my suggestion is distinguish both things from each other. Do one thing that's really business driven and incorporate inclusivity, sustainability and everything, but always with the lens of being like growing the business or being profitable, and also do something that's related to the purpose of your company, which is pure charity. I just heard an interview this week from somebody who worked a long time for Coca-Cola and then for Salesforce. And he said, I didn't know that Salesforce, the founder of Salesforce, from the beginning, he had the 1-1-1. 1% of the employer time, 1% of the profits, and 1% of the software they donate for charity purposes, which was fine when there were one person or when they didn't have employees and revenues at all. But now they stick to that and just make the calculation what that means. But they always did that just for charity, and for sure it's helping the brand and everything like that. But they know this one thing is charity, and people will just see that as a charity. And the other thing is being a 21st century business model, which includes sustainability and inclusion. Don't try to do it both ways.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation and for your insights. It was really helpful to see how innovation and diversity can join together. My question goes more on how to get people behind the idea, because with my experience, I've encountered that getting a snowball effect out from something you do for diversity, for a foundation, for an NGO, it's quite difficult to keep going when people are forced at some point to actually follow the rules. For example, corporate governance. If you don't really believe it or believe on it, it's quite hard to get this kind of breaking the wall, the first break in the wall, to actually get people behind the idea. So I don't know if you can tell us a little bit more about your experience about how to get to the first step to actually people get behind and support your ideas, diversity, innovation.
I think probably Lina can speak to how to get people to that point. And I think though, at some point, if you do implement corporate governance or some type of a program or that type of thing, and you do have people who just don't want to conform in that way, then potentially they aren't right for that company. And that's also decisions that you have to make, because some people are set in their ways and some people will not change, and that's fine. It's totally their prerogative. But if your goal is to really make changes, then you need to have people and employees that are on board with your vision generally as a company. And I would say that's also something you have to take into account. And then as to how to get people on board, I think you have pretty good insight.
Yeah. So not just because I'm the founder of Purpose Hub, but the answer is it's purpose. It's the why, especially when you think about change and when you think about diversity. People need to understand why they should do that. Because we are all challenged by time, by tasks, reputation, expectation, whatever. The list is so long. And if you need to be very clear about why people should join the idea, what's in there for them. This is what's being missed most of the time when we talk about diversity inclusion. It's this big vision, and then we are a diverse company, but you lose people on the way because they don't know, why should I do that? right? What's this? So first of all, what I mentioned in the beginning, talk with people about their teenager time, just to make them feel, remember the feeling of exclusion, because this is something that everybody felt. And people sometimes don't say, if they do not fall in the categories of DNI, then they think, why should I bother, right? Because I don't know how somebody feels that's not included, but yes, you do. First of all, then be very clear on the why, on the communication, and also be aware that the journey of diversity and inclusion is very long. And it is important that you work on the sensibility to see where the person is. Because it can be that somebody that you encounter and you try to convince from your idea, it's just in the beginning of the D&I journey. And they maybe is a male, white male, 50-year-old senior leader. And for him, probably in the last 2 years, he heard a lot that he's privileged, that he's privileged, that he's privileged, and maybe he's not open to listen right now. Try to figure out where on the journey are the people that you want to convince, and grab them exactly where they are on the journey and explain them then their why. And then you will see who will become a change agent and who's just somebody who you just turn from a no-sayer to somebody who is neutral, which is already a lot when we talk about change. Timo? We're missing Timo. We are including Timo.
Yeah, I'm here. No. I'm here. Yeah, I mean, changing people without an intrinsic motivation, I don't think this will work. Then you will have like a shadow change or like a greenwashing change. So because they are not really interested into these topics. I think there has to be an intrinsic thing. And just side information, which is also really interesting. I work also at the lead at Kapakura, lead corporate finance, and Kapakura is an impact investor, which means they investing in education, health, and environmental. And here we differentiate, for example, real impact startups or not real impact startups. And the differentiation is kind of business speaking, but we say the business model has to be impact within the EBITDA, which means if there is a startup, for example, which sells some stuff and they just donate after their winnings some euros for something, it is not sustainable, and there is no real impact behind it. It's more like, okay, look, I'm a startup and I'm doing money, and a little bit of this money I will donate to this one. This is not our definition of impact. Impact has really, there has to be, the business model has to be to change the world a little bit better. And yeah, this is, I think, also you can take into account, because it is not like you can have a normal business model, which is also not bad. You can do money without doing good, but if you have a real impact vision, then you have to you need to have a real business model which can help some people, for example, on the medication sector, on the educational sector, or something other parts. And yeah, this is what we see very often. I think this was also a question, because there is some startups which say, okay, Timo, what do you think? There is currently a big trend onto the sustainable topics because of Corona. And I say, of course there is. And they say, okay, then I can write into my business plan, okay, we also support this and this and this. And they say, no, this is nonsense. This is not real impact startup. Then you need to have a real vision with a real impact, and then it's fine. Yeah.
Iris?
Yeah, I have a question. So for female entrepreneurs here in Germany, like how do you see yourself? Like what kind of difficulties or obstacles like you have met here compared to the male like peers? You think it's more difficult for women or the same kind of like similar situation between the two genders?
Well, I would say it's in some regard, you can kind of use the fact that people might underestimate you to an advantage because you can kind of come from a low expectation and sort of exceed the mark, which is also, which is generally a better place to come from. But I do agree that, and I also think actually in terms of like financing and stuff, that's a situation that I'm finding myself in, is that I think women tend to be more careful with their expectations of themselves and also in presenting themselves to potential investors. They might not really go for it as much as guys do. You know, I think we kind of sell ourselves short, and that's, you know, either a societal or just sort of a psychological thing that I think women tend to do. And on the other hand, I think you do have women who also then overcompensate and try and come across as too strong. And I'm a businesswoman and you have to take me seriously. And that can also be like not necessarily like attractive partner to be working with. And so I think it's sort of finding your bearings and seeing yourself as actually an equal and not lower or better or whatever, but actually seeing the playing field as level. And for me personally, one of the things that's been difficult is, for example, when it comes to paying yourself as an entrepreneur, how could I possibly pay myself if like we're not making millions of euros yet? But there's guys who pay themselves 6 figures and they haven't even sold a dime. And so I think that is just, for me personally, I mean, not to say that I would do that, but it's sort of having that confidence of being, well, actually, I have put in the work and I deserve to be here and I deserve to have this funding. I deserve to have this investment and to be taken seriously, but also to believe actually in yourself that like you are as capable as any male counterpart. I think in terms of Germany specifically, yeah, there's a lot of access. I mean, you just have to kind of look for it. It's sort of building those networks. You know, I think we have a great network here at WHU. It's using that, it's leveraging those contacts and just potentially being confident about it.
Thank you. Actually, I've read some article the other days. It's about like female entrepreneurs when they're asking for investments. Normally, I saw there's a big gap between female and male, what they can got at the end. So it's basically what you said. Thank you.
I think probably, I mean, Timo mentioned it before, you know, female investor, female leaders are really, you know, they kind of deliver what they promise, right? Which is great. But at the same time, they're afraid to promise too much. And so you might be losing out on something that is potentially worth what you think in your head, but you're going to ask for about 30% less just to make sure that you can actually achieve that. And, you know, that is obviously a positive in the sense that you're responsible and you're doing things well and everything. But on the other hand, you know, are you potentially leaving that percentage on the floor, you know?
Thanks.
Awesome. Any final questions before we wrap this up? No, perfect. So I would like to give another big round of applause for our panelists. And before we leave, there's a little something from us that we have.
Thank you.
Timo, I'll save you one of these bags. We'll come to close.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. So guys, we are serving some snacks and some beverages for the networking session after this event. Hope to see you guys there. Thank you so much.
Guys, don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, social media. and you will receive the regular updates about our upcoming events.
Bell icon. Click on it. Oh, okay, fair point. I don't know. Went a little off.